We've covered quite a lot of woke washing in our time, haven't we? And I've seen an escalation in this recently, and I think it's best to just point out all of the things that have been in the news recently, starting with this, which is Goosebumps books sanitized without R.L. Stine's permission. So even
this is quite upsetting for me because as a kid, I obviously being born in the late 90s, I wasn't around at the peak of Goosebumps, but I was around long enough for when the charity shops were hawking them from all of the 90s kids who'd grown out of them. So I went round charity shops hunting the entire Goosebumps collection bit by bit for a couple of years between the ages of about 7 and 10, and I really enjoyed them, particularly the choose your own adventure ones. Growing up now, they're not nearly as scary as they made out to be, but the gimmicks are always quite fun. You know, like piano lessons can be murder with the decapitated hands just playing like that, or the dummy one which R.L. Stine looks like he's turning into with age, weirdly enough.
Yeah, so this was actually reported on as if R.L. Stine wanted it to be revised, and reading this and reading exactly what he said is the complete opposite. So I don't know what the media are playing at. Maybe they're trying to make it out as if, yes, he wanted this, it's actually the will of the author, when actually it's the complete opposite. So
I would have been most upset at Jack Black playing me in a movie.
So the Times article reads as follows. The author of one of the world's most successful children's fiction series has accused his publisher of editing references to mental health and weight in his books without his permission. Last week, the Times revealed that R.L. Stine's Goosebumps books, which sold more than 300 million copies, are the second highest selling series behind Harry Potter, had been re-released as sanitized ebooks. So I don't think it's necessarily the physical copies. Stine has now said that the publisher, Scholastic, I think they're actually associated with schools, aren't they?
Yes, they do the book fairs. They're also the ones that buy really crappy Marvel comics that no one will purchase en masse to keep them afloat, like something called Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, which was unbelievably progressive and race swapped the protagonist. There were absolutely no orders from the general market, but Scholastic ordered them by the droves to hawk to school kids.
It does seem a little bit politically captured to me, doesn't it? But it carries on to say, made the changes to his work without reviewing them with him, which seems pretty rude to me. I've never changed a word in Goosebumps. Any changes were never shown to me, Stine tweeted. As well as changing cultural references such as Walkman, the publisher removed words that it believed some readers might find offensive. A character is described as cheerful rather than plump. I mean, that's an entirely different meaning, but okay. Also, it's sort of one of those weird euphemisms that people say, particularly in Britain. Oh, they're awfully cheerful, meaning, you know,
she's got a lovely personality.
Yeah. They're bubbly. That's the one that always
you can
gets
definitely
used.
tell a woman did this censorship.
References to villains making victims slaves has been removed, and crazy has been changed to silly.
So slavery no longer bad, being overweight is good, and mental illness is just a choice.
Yes, apparently so. In one of the novels, a character wearing a Halloween costume dressed as a dark and stormy night no longer wears black face paint.
Justin Trudeau, most effective.
So, imaginary face paint, now haram as well. So not only can you not do it physically in person, if you imagine it, that's bad too. Don't even imagine blackface, whatever you do.
What's Monster Blood 5 going to be called? Positive person slime?
Scholastic said it had made the changes to keep the language current and avoid imagery that could negatively impact a young person's view of themselves today, with a particular focus on mental health.
Yes, Walkmans, very triggering. This is the important fact of why you should buy physical media. It's really difficult to store. I'm literally out of space with bookshelves. I need another one because all my comics are going on top of my wardrobe. But I almost realised this when, to use a pretty egregious example, there's an entire volume of Green Lantern from the reprint from issues 1 to 46 that will never be reprinted. And that is because the author, Gerard Jones, is locked up for possession of CP. Evil Man should have received the death penalty. However, there were a bunch of editors, inkers, colorists, artists who now will not have their work reprinted. And instead of reprinting the work as an omnibus that could have the proceeds donated to a children's charity, which would be a great idea for DC to do, they've just shelved it and it's only available digitally on very legitimate websites that are certainly not Pirate Bay. And so this is why you need physical media, because physical media can never be altered, whereas these are all in ebooks. This is the eradication of history, even with something as innocuous as technology that modern kids might not have an easy reference for, but they could Google it, for example, in order that we live in an eternal, manipulatable present where the progressives reign supreme as the emissaries of what is doctrinally correct.
It's also a strange approach that you're trying to bring up cultural references to the present. I mean, I know what a wireless is. I never lived in the days of the wireless. It's probably because I lived in a culture that didn't bend over backwards to accommodate for my ignorance, which is kind of what we should be doing.
But I'm also not infantile enough to not understand time. I know it's a really overstated point, but we do have the concepts of history, but then history is an impediment to progress, I suppose.
So, another series of children's books have been altered. So, sensitivity readers find fairy tales problematic after re-examining Ladybird books. And it's got a picture of Snow White. Ladybird has used sensitivity readers, which is such a cringy term, isn't it? To re-examine some of its children's books, and fairy stories have proven problematic, the Telegraph can reveal. The publisher's back catalogue includes fiction and educational material based on classic tales like Cinderella and Snow White, and characters and plots in these stories are understood to be potentially troubling for inclusion experts. What is an inclusion expert?
Do you know the person who spearheaded the Roald Dahl erasure by any chance? A self-identified autistic non-binary anarchist. So that is the kind of people that are doing this.
What a set of descriptors. It carries on to say, handsome princes and beautiful princesses falling for them at first sight have been deemed problematic by sensitivity readers, advising on offensive content. And I thought for a second, well, you know, broken clocks right twice a day. Actually, love at first sight's just lust, and you can't love someone if you don't know who they are. That's weird. And it's a strange cultural practice, in my opinion.
Well, hang on. And this is something we're going to be chatting to Mary Harrington about eventually. Throughout history, infatuation was kind of the prerequisite to your ability to commit to a marriage, which then you would grow in and grow together with, because marriage happened a lot earlier in the courtship process. So this is reflective of attitudes at the time, and also this weird subversion in Disney has been going on quite a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think Disney's been degenerate since it started, in my opinion.
Not since it started.
I think so.
I think you can pinpoint it at Beauty and the Beast, because it's so obvious that Gaston was the hero, and they were just gaslighting an entire generation of women into rooting for the woman that wanted to read vague revolutionary literature while shagging a furry.
But yeah, my gripe with love at first sight is don't call it love. Yeah. You might find them attractive. You might, fancy them. You might be lusting after them. But you can't love someone if you don't know who they are. That's weird. You're a mentally ill person if you love someone that you don't know.
See mine and Stelios' Symposium on Love for more.
So, yes, but their objection isn't that. It's due to the privilege given to physical attractiveness and heteronormative romance.
Chad, yes.
I mean, what's wrong with that, really? Outdated or harmful elements in fairy tales, according to publishing insiders, may also include characters presuming each other's pronouns or social class, and a lack of diversity among blonde hair and blue-eyed protagonists.
It just frustrates me that these people even given the time of day. At this point, it's not even worth refuting. It's just this is all signalling to your side. No thanks. I'm going to read the other stuff. I'm good.
I mean, also presuming social class. It's certainly in Britain, you can almost tell immediately.
They're a princess.
Yeah.
It's not presuming. It's just what they are.
What, a working class princess?
All right, Meghan Markle.
It's the John Lennon song that didn't exist.
He deserved to be shot.
But on the topic of, these sorts of things, here's an Epochs number 96 about William Wilberforce. Of course, this is talking about the abolition of slavery and that sort of thing.
It's excellent, by the way. And
this is how something we should be proud of. We shouldn't be rewriting our history. We should be holding it up and saying, yes, actually, we are good people. We went around the world and enforced morality on them because they're incapable of being moral themselves.
Yeah, we have reasons to venerate our...
libertarian of me. But
we have reasons to venerate our past and also express gratitude that we have inherited one of the most moral links in the great chain of human civilization.
So, moving on to more depressing stuff. Here's Disney's Peter Pan and Wendy praised for casting first black Tinkerbell in new remake, because that's what people want in a remake. My problem with Peter Pan is that, Tinkerbell, white, disgusting.
I no longer believe in fairies.
At least you can make her disappear if you don't believe in her.
Yeah.
I mean,
just like her dad.
So yes, there's also another aspect to this in that Peter Pan fans slammed trailer for woke remake with girls among lost boys. I mean, they're really blowing the lines here. Yeah, we're the lost boys with girls, by the way.
Defeats the entire purpose. Also, I don't know if you remember a little while ago when it got added to Disney Plus, it had a trigger warning for outdated representations of Native Americans. Okay. I do find it amusing though, the one person that kept white, Captain Hook.
It's funny that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is it always that the villain is white and they always change the protagonist to be black? There's something going on here.
Yeah, I also don't think it makes any sense because as I was reliably informed by the Smithsonian, being on time is whiteness. And so why would Captain Hook be afraid of the crocodile that has swallowed a clock? Would it not be Peter Pan and Tinkerbell instead?
Yeah, they're terrified of the standards of white supremacy that say, time comes for us all. So here's another one which I thought was particularly silly. BBC, ITV and Netflix set to ban corsets for period dramas as TV bosses join increasingly woke world. I don't think this is directly woke. I don't think it's quite the right use of the word, but
Have you not seen Bridgerton?
Yeah, I think it's some sort of weird American fetishistic fiction of what British aristocracy used to be like. It's like, oh yes, all of these black people that never existed. I mean, if you watch Bridgerton, it's even less representative of our population now, let alone then. It's just ridiculous.
Same with Doctor Who's Frost Fair episode when he said that Jesus was black, history was a whitewash, and it's like, no, weren't that many black people skating on the Thames. It just didn't happen.
But it reads as follows. Despite being used in many dramas in recent decades, including Bridgerton, Downton Abbey, and Pride and Prejudice adaptations, one of the most recognisable items could be soon ditched over fears that the health and safety of staff is at risk.
Just don't tie them in as tight.
Yeah, well, there's also the fact that you're just making yourself look less authentic. I mean, it's already pretty jarring that there are black aristocratic ladies in...
Yeah, I think we jumped the shark on Black Anne Boleyn, Josh. I don't think they're going to listen to us.
And the article lists the garments date back to ancient Greece, but became a fashion staple in Victorian era England, I think, meant to say, which began in the 1830s. In a move to appease young actors, they will now be allowed to wear their own underwear instead of the classic undergarment. So you're going to get Victoria's Secrets in bloody...
Oh, I might start watching, actually. I love the idea that they just show up to set and they're like, right, get your kit off. We'll strap you into the corset. No. As if they didn't wear their own underwear to work. But they're already wearing their own underwear. This is just period accurate.
Rather than this necessarily being woke, I think it's more of a weird health and safety thing, isn't it? Which is it's adjacent, but it's not really right to use that word, is it? But I wanted to talk about it just because it's another thing that's, you're not getting this authentic dedication to art. You're not getting Viggo Mortensen booting a helmet when he's acting and breaking his foot.
Or deflecting the dagger that was accidentally thrown directly at him.
Mm-hmm. Like, that sort of stuff is gold. You have to suffer to make your performance good.
Yeah, I don't know if the audience have seen. I know you have. Magic the Gathering have developed a series of cards for Lord of the Rings. Aragorn is a black man with dreads. We was Return of the Kangs. This is it's insane. Like, there's nothing else we can say other than just pour our scorn on it.
So, moving on to another case, here we have James Bond books edited to remove racist references. So, this is another Telegraph article. They've been quite good on this stuff, actually. The Telegraph understands that a disclaimer accompanying the reissued text will read, "This book was written at a time when terms and attitudes which might be considered offensive by modern readers were commonplace." And this is a direct quote. "A number of updates have been made in this edition while keeping as close as possible to the original text and period in which it is set."
So we've rewritten it, but we've tried to least rewrite it as possible. Okay, just don't rewrite it.
Yeah. I think people can, if they want to, overlook things that they don't agree with in books.
That's a really radical take, Josh.
I know.
It's almost like we read books all the time that we don't agree with.
Mm-hmm. I listen to the Beatles. I think John Lennon's a terrible human being. It's easy to overlook the parts you don't like. You can like other stuff. But carries on to say, the changes to Fleming's book result in some depictions of black people being reworked or removed entirely. So yes,
erasing black voices.
Hey,
wow.
Snap. Dated references to other ethnicities remain, such as Bond's racial terms for East Asian people and the spy's disparaging views of Oddjob, Goldfinger's Korean henchman.
So some San Franciscan black person clearly did all of the edits to this version.
Yes. References to the sweet tang of rape,
bit
delivering women, failing to do a man's work,
right.
and homosexuality being a stubborn disability also remain. So
I prefer not to speak. If I speak, I'm in big trouble.
I find it strange that these things are okay to keep in, but God forbid you represent black people badly. When, I mean, some of these are objectively more offensive, surely.
Well, it's not even, most of the representations aren't even badly, especially if the black person is a villain. So in robbing the black character of a villainous portrayal, you are saying their race supersedes their actions, and therefore you cannot be a villain as long as you are black. That is the assumption.
Very strange. In the sensitivity reader approved version of Live and Let Die, Bond's assessment that would be African criminals in the gold and diamond trades are pretty law-abiding chaps, I should have thought, except when they've drunk too much becomes pretty law-abiding chaps, I should have thought.
But they're by definition not law-abiding because there would be criminals.
Yes.
So, of course, there needs to be a moment in there where they would be non-law-abiding, and so he is stipulating when they're drunk, that's the point. So they wouldn't be criminals if you remove the ability for them to be criminals when they're drunk.
That's not even that much of a negative assessment. I mean, I imagine I become less law-abiding when I have had a bit to drink.
I've seen it.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's what happens when you drink lots of alcohol, is you start becoming a miscreant.
Yeah, Josh goes from neutral evil to chaotic good within about 3 pints.
You're saying alcohol makes me a better person. All right. First person to say that. Another altered scene featuring Bond visiting Harlem in New York, where a salacious striptease at a nightclub makes the male crowd, including 007, increasingly agitated. The original passage read, Bond could hear the audience panting and grunting like pigs at the trough. He felt his own hands gripping the tablecloth. His mouth was dry. The revised section replaces the pigs references with Bond could sense the electric tension in the room.
Right, that's a rubbish piece of writing. It's painfully cliche, and it also desexualizes the behavior of the patrons and Bond while it's in a sexual context. So this is just really bad writing. These are people, basically, who couldn't write novels themselves, going into the editorial department and overlaying their fan fiction onto great works of literature.
I also like the original in that it's comparing them to pigs. It's basically condemning them, isn't it?
It's a morally loaded image, and that's what they can't abide by.
Yeah. They're trying to make it sound like a good thing, and it's not. So, further lengthy passage describing Bond's night out in Harlem, including an argument between a man and his girlfriend conducted largely in accented dialogue, Fleming describes as straight Harlem Deep South with a lot of New York thrown in, has been entirely removed.
How is that offensive? It's
That's
just
a description of an accent. I mean, the N-word, which Fleming used to refer to black people when he was writing during the 50s and 60s, has almost entirely expunged from the revised text.
Okay, yeah, but that was also used in a different context. Like, yeah, sure, it was pretty much derogatory, but in the same way that, what's his name? The Rivers of Blood guy. Enoch Powell. Enoch Powell used race interchangeably with ethnicity and national origin. So did Churchill. So words can have different meanings and contexts as to how they're used now. So he could have been using the N-word flippantly, and I haven't read all the Bond text, so I don't know this, but it could have been in the same way that Steinbeck was using it, for example, to highlight the unnecessary nature of racial prejudice towards crooks in Of Mice and Men. So it can be used in ways which are either emphasizing that it is wrong to use it derogatorily, or because of this being almost 100 years ago now, it could be used in a neutral way, whereas we obviously see it as a derogatory phrase now.
I very much agree. Finally, in most cases, this is replaced by black person or black man, but racial descriptors are entirely dropped in some instances. I mean, if you want to create a compelling image of a character, it's normally pretty useful to know what their ethnicity is so you can imagine what the author intends you to imagine. But alas, these people clearly don't know how to write a book. So let's just give up on that. It's kind of depressing. I mean, at least there are plenty of editions out there to get before the woke rewrite comes out. But the kind of reasoning that this sort of thing goes on is this sort of thing. So, actress from Emmett Till movie blames racism, sexism for Oscar's snub, rather than, maybe your performance just wasn't good enough. But no, it's racism and sexism. So
We're
you get
talking
people-
about misogynoir. Oh, do one, please.
I find that word so hilarious. It sounds so ridiculous. I'm not a misogynist. I'm not a racist. I'm a misogynoir.
Shaken, not stirred.
It's the patrician's form of racism. But yeah, it's stuff like this silly terminology coming up with misogynoir. I know she didn't come up with that, but just grifting for greater notoriety, basically.
Wakanda Forever was nominated. Like, it's just that your film is terrible. Because if the bar is Wakanda Forever, watch mine and Harry's video on how horrible that was, if you need to know, by the way. Don't watch it yourself. It's rubbish. If that is the bar for quality of what they will allow in their affirmative action for these awards, then maybe it's just that your film was so egregiously horrible, they couldn't even justify including it in the rankings.
So this next one, Disney again. Disney slammed for anti-white propaganda, new Proud Family reboot.
I've seen some of the clips of this.
So, a reboot of Disney show The Proud Family is receiving backlash over a rap in recent episodes of the cartoon featuring kids debating about slavery reparations, arguing that America owes Black Americans because America still has not atoned for the systematic prejudice, racism, and white supremacy. And I'm reading a direct quote here. This country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country. The song repeatedly states in the Disney Plus episode of The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, and I'm quoting again, the descendants of slaves continued to build it. Slaves built this country, and we are the descendants of slaves in America, have earned reparations for their suffering and continue to earn reparations every moment we spend submerged in systemic prejudice, racism, and white supremacy that America was founded with and still has not atoned for. This is not something that you should have in a children's program, and also wrong. I mean, slavery did not build America, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say, thank you for all the ideological psychobabble. Now explain Liberia. Now, there was a recent clip that you showed me on Twitter of two African men trying to put out a fire, captured Wakandan Fire Department. And they were shoveling sand and just throwing it at a building, completely missing the fire. And I'd like to just suggest that it's not slavery that built America, because if it was, then the people that share the ethnicity and the culture of said slaves, before it was erased according to them being brought from Africa into the US and they were entrenched in white supremacy. Why was something similar to America not built in Africa? Is it perhaps that the culture that you denigrate as white supremacy in America allows more people to flourish and thrive than those in Africa? Because same ethnicity, different culture.
Mm-hmm. And here's another thing. This is in the UK again. BBC under fire for suggesting Marie Antoinette was lesbian. So this comes from... I think this was written by a lady who wrote another historic figure as a lesbian as well. So it seems to be just a weird fetishistic obsession of the writer.
There was one period drama on ITV that maybe by the same writer was about an interracial lesbian relationship. So it might have been the same person, because I've seen this advertised with the song Dangerous Woman over the top. And it's just this weird histrionic... It's like The Favourite, that film that got all those Oscar nominations. They're obsessed with revitalising female characters in period dramas as scissor sisters, I suppose we could say.
So if we skip over that next one and let's just go to this final one. This is what is in store for the future. This is what the world are lacking. Artists are using AI to create fat, black, sci-fi and fantasy characters. And John, would you be able to just scroll through some of the images here? Obviously, that's not AI generated. That's a guy who did it. But
Lizzo protagonists, ladies and gentlemen.
It's like the people from Up became their own voting block, isn't it?
You mean WALL-E?
That's the one, yeah.
There we go.
I'm mixing my Pixar films.
Though these do look like balloons. Oh my, no. No. Come on. That's the fifth element. She's got a rocket pack. Oh my God. What's this for? Hippos in space?
Apparently so. So yes, this is the average quality of a BuzzFeed article these days, by the way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, you could weep about the future of our culture, but at least some of the culture that seems to be supplanting it will make for good unintentional comedy here. Because if this is the direction things are going, I am going to have a bit of a laugh at the expense of the destruction of everything we hold dear.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site. such as the premium articles, this one on the BBC, Being Dishonest, with an audio track for silver and gold tier listeners. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuses_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.